want to welcome you to the Trauma Informed Educators Network podcast. This podcast is coming out of the Trauma Informed Educators Network Facebook group. I am so looking forward to talking to people globally about their trauma-informed journey. As the principal of Fall Hamilton Elementary School, a trauma-informed school in Nashville, Tennessee, I have learned that this is not a destination, and it truly is a process of learning and adjusting. So this podcast will be speaking to guests all over the world about people who are just starting their journeys and people have been on this journey for many, many years. So I hope you enjoy our guests. I hope you learned something just as I am. And welcome to the Trauma Informed Educators Network podcast. To say I am excited to have this next guest is an understatement. Danna, how in the world are you?
Hi, Matthew. I'm so excited. I'm so grateful to be connecting with you today, coming to you live from Baltimore.
Absolutely. So give a little context. Danna and I go back several years. I was at a conference here in Tennessee, and the week before I had read this Ed Week article about this educator that was starting this revolution around wellness and mental health for educators. And I attended this conference, and the promoter of the conference emailed me and said, you need to meet this person. So I went to the session, and wow, has it changed me as a human, as an educator, as a principal. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of telling a little bit of you, but tell us about you and what you do and all the amazing things you have going on.
Oh, thank you so much. So I'm the founder of an organization called Happy Teacher Revolution. We were born in Baltimore, but we are an international movement on a mission to organize and conduct support groups for educators in the field of mental health and wellness to increase teacher happiness, retention, and professional sustainability. So while our name is Happy Teacher Revolution, by teacher, we mean anybody who's in a caregiver relationship intensive profession with a child. So anyone who has the potential to make a difference and make an impact in the life of a child, we believe that we need to take care of them so they can continue serving the kiddos in their communities. And my journey with Happy Teacher Revolution started before I was a teacher, when I was still a student. I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. And when I was in high school and college, I suffered from crippling anxiety and depression and panic attacks. I represented the 1 in 4 Americans who grapples with a mental illness, the 1 in 5 college students who has contemplated suicide. And I represented the statistic that the onset of mental illness most frequently occurs between the ages of 17 and 24. And it was my teachers in high school and college who I consider my first responders, essential workers, so to speak, in terms of honestly saving my life. Like, they recognized the warning signs and subtle changes in behavior and encouraged me to seek treatment and get help. And without them, I wouldn't be talking with you on this awesome podcast today. So my teachers are my heroes. They are the reason I'm still here, and they're the reason I became a teacher myself. So for 7 years, I served as a Baltimore City Public School teacher and realized firsthand the emotional demands of the job and the unpreparedness I felt in terms of working with students who had experienced trauma firsthand. And we know that trauma in a child's life can range from any number of things, whether it's losing a pet or losing a parent, moving neighborhoods, moving countries, experiencing a natural disaster or a global pandemic, witnessing an act of gun violence, anything. So part of my healing journey personally has been serving as an advocate for mental health awareness because of my background. And I was the national spokeswoman for NAMI Maryland, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and the Music for Mental Health campaign. And because I was so outspoken about a topic typically wrapped in stigma and shame and secrecy, teachers came out to me about things that they were struggling with, the stress, anxiety, and overwhelm and isolation as it relates to the job. So I wanted to create a forum, a community, a consciousness-raising group to help prioritize teachers seeing self-care as professional development, celebrate teachers who are setting boundaries, saying no, and taking care of themselves, because I believe in the sustainability of the career. So after 7 years in the classroom, I left to work on Happy Teacher Revolution full-time, joined the Johns Hopkins Social Innovation Lab, and we were the winners of the Hopkins Social Innovation Lab last year. So we've used the funding to help support teachers and scale this movement worldwide. So we offer support for teachers online on happyteacherrevolution.com, but it's been really exciting to be able to work with educators to help support them in initiating these spaces for each other, because we believe that teachers deserve the time and space to heal, deal, and be real about the social, emotional, and intellectual demands they face on the job.
And I'm very proud to say that Fall Hamilton, my school, was on the front end of this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we have 3 revolutionaries in our building that meet monthly. And I will tell you, as someone who's experienced this as an educator, both at the conference when we met, and then also the first Happy Teacher Revolution circle in my school. I think we went through 3.5 boxes of tissues because what we realized is we were all in a space of struggle, but we were also all in a space of safety and connection. So we could expose our own vulnerabilities to bring us together. And so I think now more than ever that this conversation is imperative. And when you said trauma, you know, trauma isn't what happens to somebody, it's how they respond to it. And I think that this pandemic has exposed, and know that now we've all been exposed to something that could be considered traumatic. Every educator in this country has been exposed to this. So how do you see the role of Happy Teacher Revolution right now in the lives of educators?
Right. For us, it's about making that connection of what's best practice for our students is also best practice for ourselves, best practice for human beings. What I heard you just say, it reminded me so much of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's not just the basic needs at the bottom, our students and ourselves, too hungry, too tired, too thirsty, too cold, too hot. But really, like, do we have those higher levels on the hierarchy? So are there feelings of belonging and esteem? Does our safety matter? Is that being prioritized? Because all of those levels are essential in order to reach that higher level of self-actualization. So at Happy Teacher Revolution, what we're offering is an opportunity for teachers to have that framework, methodology, support, and structure that's based in trauma-informed practices for the grown-ups. Because it's so important.
Hold on just a second.
Oh, sure.
This thing just came unplugged. Just a second. Darn it. I'm going to go back. Dang it. It's a pain. All right.
I can just answer the same question or start from the jump, or
yeah, let me.
Why
is it sounding?
Is there any feedback on your end from me?
No, it's a little fuzzy. If what I've learned with the microphone is if you stand back a little bit, it'll pick it up. And if you stand close, it kind of makes it sound a little different.
Oh, so it's a little bit too close. Okay.
Yeah, if you just stand like normal, like this distance, it'll actually pick up better sound. Give me just a second. Let me find out where I asked that question, and I'm just going to start over, okay?
I have like a pop screen, but I don't know how to put it on.
You shouldn't have to get too close to it. I can adjust the sound on this end too.
Okay.
So if you're too low, I can always turn it up. Give me just a second. Let me see where we are here.
Get a sneeze out.
I didn't get that recorded. I wish I would have. That would have been awesome. Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to cut exactly where I asked that question. So you're just going to start over and answer, what do you see the role of Happy Teacher Revolution right now? Okay. Here we go. I'm going to point at you when it's time. Oh, hold on just a second. That overlaid. Dang it, undo. Edit, undo, leave change. Edit, undo, recording. Okay, now I'm going to do it from right here, and then I'll push it back. Okay. Why is it doing that? Sorry. Okay, let's try it again. Ready?
Well, in terms of the role of Happy Teacher Revolution, we really are making the connection between best practices that we're able to offer for our students and offering that for ourselves. And what I heard you say just now reminded me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So not only do we need to prioritize our own basic needs, are we too hungry, too thirsty, too hot, too tired, too hot, too cold, but where are we finding our needs being met in terms of our safety, our feelings of belonging, our feelings of esteem? And so with Happy Teacher Revolution, it takes a village to raise a child, but for us, we want to take care of the village. We want to make sure that everyone who's working with kiddos is building that foundation of self-awareness and self-care. And then beyond that, offering a leadership opportunity for individuals to be revolutionary in leading these communities and holding space for one another. Because I think, there is so much trauma around the grieving process of this pandemic, feelings of loss, feelings of being robbed of time and opportunities to work with our kiddos, and also the anxiety about what to anticipate coming forward. For all of our teachers who aren't tenured yet, who are wondering, do I even have a position next year? For all of our student teachers who have been rushed graduated so that we can utilize their time and resources right away. I mean, I think the fact that we are going through a teacher shortage as it is, there's such an opportunity and need to invest in our teachers' mental health and wellness, because we are spending $7.3 billion before the pandemic even happened to constantly train and recruit new teachers. And so I just think it is really, really important. And what Happy Teacher Revolution is doing is offering online opportunities for teachers to grow and develop and truly transform.
Well, and I think too that the essential business right now is a term that we all are kind of understanding. And I think there's been exposing of essential business people who don't necessarily get the essential feel on a day-to-day when there isn't a pandemic. And I think when you say teacher shortage, what I hear is there's a shortage of teacher appreciation and value.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, well, people, it's a teacher shortage. Really? No, it's that who wants to go into a profession where you're emotionally attacked nonstop, you're told you're not doing a good job, and then you're paid less than what you're definitely worth in a societal standpoint. So I think that that's part of Happy Teacher Revolution too, is we no longer as educators have to look at ourselves as martyrs, right? We don't have to beat ourselves up and think we live in a space of, oh, woe is us. It's really about revolting for ourselves and our own well-being and standing in a space of voice. So talk through that. Like, talk about, why is it called the Happy Teacher Revolution? Why not the Happy Teacher Project? Why not the Happy Teacher, community? Why revolution?
Yeah, I needed a strong word, and it's an abrasive word. It's a word about uprising. It's a word about shifting the lens through which we support students by supporting the adult caregivers. The word love is in revolution. It comes from a place of love. It comes from a place of love for the kiddos, of self-love. This idea that compassion isn't like a pie where slices can just be doled out and there isn't enough left for ourselves and for each other. I think the other word in revolution is evolution. There is so much that needs to be changed in the education system, and it's not happening fast enough. Whether it is the fact that the most, I would say, revolutionary thing thus far in education has been flexible seating. It's really like the craziest thing that's happened so far. It's like, wow, we don't have kiddos sitting in desks anymore in rows. We're going to change how they sit. Well, let's change how we professionally develop educators. Let's change how we structure the school day around what's best for kids and what's best for the adults. Well, let's change and evolve what professional development looks like for educators. Companies like Google are investing in their teacher or in their employees' wellness and happiness, and they're seeing that their employees are taking less sick days. They're more likely to come back to work the following year. They're more invested in their job. Their job satisfaction goes up. But our teachers are on the cover of Time magazine for selling their blood plasma because they're not earning a living wage, and they got all those student loans to pay off too. So, in terms of Happy Teacher Revolution, we're a very positive and optimistic organization, but honestly, we are a grassroots movement that was born from a place of pain and darkness and desperation. And it was during a year in my classroom that I started this. I had 39 kindergartners. We didn't have heating. We didn't have air conditioning. There was asbestos in the tiles and lead in the water. And I was working for administrators that were sexually harassing non-tenured female teachers on the staff because we were too scared to speak up. So I didn't feel supported by my administrators. I didn't feel supported by leadership, but I felt supported by my colleagues, by by one another. And so that was how Happy Teacher Revolution started. And so, this is very much a grassroots movement that is driven by teachers for teachers, with all of us together.
Well, I think what you described, your space in which you were working and living and supporting kids, it really put a lot of weight on my chest hearing all of those pieces. But unfortunately, it's a reality a lot of people live in. And I appreciate that description of revolution, because it sounds like you're one of us, a disruptor, right? Unapologetic disruptor is what I identify myself as. And Disruptors Unite is a hashtag we use often to move all this work, because we are so far past what education used to be. And I always hear, well, when I was in school, they used to do this, this, and this. And I always tell older adults, when they say these things, school isn't what it is when you were in school anymore. It's what they're learning in elementary school is what I learned in middle school. Some of the things are even what I started learning in high school. And the information age right now has changed everything for every kid. So I love that you're standing in that space of, it's a new time, it's a new world, and we have to have a voice as educators for ourselves and our own well-being. So powerful. So what I want to know now is, why is supporting mental health and wellness of teachers so important now, and how do you see this impacting systemic change after this pandemic?
So I think what's really important is really viewing Happy Teacher Revolution and this movement through not only a data-driven lens, but through an equity lens. So there has been a recent study by the Yale Child Study Center, and researchers were investigating rates and predictors of preschool expulsion and suspension. And what they were able to find in this study is identifying different variables associated with expulsion and suspension. And so what they found was that elevated teacher job stress was a predictor of increased likelihood of expulsion. So what this means is, if preschoolers of color are 3 to 6 times as likely to be suspended as white preschoolers, and if boys are 4 times as likely to be suspended compared to girls, that this racial disproportionality is actually showing that if we're not supporting the mental health and wellness of teachers, if our teachers are stressed out and have low job satisfaction, they're more likely to suspend boys of color, which means that, and it's what is unbelievable is this is what the data shows, is that federal data from 2014 indicate that Black children make up 33% of all children suspended, and Black adults make up 33% of the total prison population. And so what's happening is if we're not seeing our teachers as human beings and supporting their happiness, their mental health, their wellness, they're flipping their lid. They're stressed out, and they're more likely to suspend students, boys of color, at these young grade levels. And we're not talking about this when it comes to self-care, right? Like we're like, oh, self-care, wellness, oh, that's bubble baths, and oh, that's woo-woo fluffy stuff, and school districts aren't paying attention to it. But like, okay, if we're going to be data-driven at the district level, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the dollars spent on constant teacher turnover. Let's look at the dollars spent in PD on everything else but teacher mental health, wellness, sustainability. Let's look at your numbers and see if there's any biases in your expulsion or suspension rates. What is the turnover rate for your teachers in these early grade levels? And so, if we're going to be data driven, like, let's look at the data. And it makes people upset. People get mad at me because I feel like, honestly, being a disruptor, it's not just about doing things better, it's about doing better things.
Well, and I think that data exposes a lot of inequities, right? And I think what you said is, if I feel like in so many times in education, we're in a constant state of reactiveness, and it's really hard for systemic lens to look from a proactive approach, right? It's always, this is happening, how do we react? This is happening, how do we react? As opposed to saying, wait, there's a trajectory happening right now with educators leaving. There's a trajectory happening right now. Like, what can we see in 5 years? And I think that is really important during this pandemic time of, the inequities are so exposed right now. I mean, it is like a spotlight on the inequities of accessibility and support of our families, especially our marginalized communities, that if we don't come out on the other side having these conversations, especially for teachers in underserved communities and teachers in higher need schools, if we don't come out having these conversations, then we have missed a major opportunity. So if you're given a platform to stand on TV and to talk from Danna Thomas's point of view to the world, what do you tell the educators right now? What do you tell them out there? Because, man, it's really difficult.
Mm-hmm. I would say, educators, I'm here for you to give you a virtual hug right now, because this pandemic has totally upended our lives and our ability to unsegment our lives. It's been hard enough before now as the teacher to set those boundaries between work and life, and now it's all together in the same place. So if I had 1 minute to tell teachers, I would say to prioritize your self-care and wellness by setting boundaries, and by setting those boundaries and blocking out time for yourself, turning off, disconnecting, shutting down your work email notifications, that creating that time and space for yourself is absolutely essential. And it makes you a better partner, a better daughter, a better father, a better mother, a better caregiver, a better teacher. Like, what is truly essential is taking time for ourselves and giving ourselves that grace, specifically through this grieving process that we're all in, and naming that and knowing that this is grief. It is not linear, that in this experience that we're having collectively, there's a collective grief happening that we're not necessarily used to, and yet we're so isolated. There is an anticipatory grief. What is happening next? I think it's just really important for teachers to be gentle with themselves and to carve out time to prioritize their self-care and wellness. And so that's why from Happy Teacher Revolution, we've offered free resources for educators, mindfulness videos, different strategies about how to work from home, as well as our intro course that dives deeper into the data and foundation behind the movement.
And I mean, I think too that as educators, it's part of our identity. It's part of our DNA of who we are as human beings when you're an educator. And so to have that rug pulled out from under some of us and going, wait, but this is who I am. And I think what you said is so powerful, because as a father of 3 whose wife is working full-time from home and has a job that she needs to stay focused in because she's an engineer and she's helping design our highway systems, I have to manage 3 boys, right? And I lose my educator identity during the day sometimes to be my father identity. And I think that that's important right now, that we reconnect ourselves to who we are as humans, not as just educators. And it's okay to stand in that space. And what the Happy Teacher Revolution says, disconnect and love, right? Like for the love of my kids, my school and my teachers and my families, I'm going to disconnect for my own family, for my own house, for my own well-being. That's what I need to do. And I think teachers need to do that more now, saying, I can only do so much. I'm going to do what I can. I have to pre-forgive myself, and I have to stand in a space that I'm doing enough. Because I did a graphic that I put out on social media, and it went like wildfire. And it was that I hit a wall. Like I hit a wall, and I was staying busy because I felt like I had to stay busy because that's what I do. And I smacked this wall after like 30 Zoom conferences and was like, dude, you're doing enough. Like you're going to do enough, whatever that is. And I think that's what you're saying, right? Is disconnect and love. Give yourself some pre-forgiveness. And why is that important now?
Yeah. So oh my gosh, I love that term pre-forgiveness, because I think that is exactly the attitude we need to have with ourselves, with each other, with the with the person in the grocery store who's being like wacky and wonky, and we're all trying to, with our masks and our gloves. And, I think it's so important now more than ever, because in terms of teaching, like we have our own needs, right? Like, so when we think about the medical population as first responders, and when we think about, all the folks, our heroes who are battling this pandemic on the front lines, like, just because you're at home in quarantine doesn't mean you're not a first responder also. Like, you absolutely are a first responder, and it can feel even more overwhelming because we have this loss of control, right? Like, there's so many things that are out of our control. And that's something that isn't unfamiliar for teachers, right? Like, there's so many mandates and policies, and people who've never been an educator call in all types of shots. Like, that is not a feeling that's unfamiliar to us. But yet I think what is important now more so than ever is just like having sort of a quarantine or self-isolation, there needs to be social media isolation. I think that's something huge too, is that all these Zoom superstars and all that kind of stuff, and you're like, oh my God, I'm scrolling on my phone and I'm just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, and it can feel even more overwhelming. And so I think there needs to be a social media distancing, just like a social distancing, and that disconnect and detach from a place of love, like, is literal, like, turn your phone off, actually unplug. That's something that I have been doing from 10 p.m. until 9 a.m. I've actually been trying to keep my phone off. It's really, really hard to do. But just think about, like, 10 years ago, that wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a thing to just be time blocking, not being on technology. But that has been something that's been important for me, at least on a personal level.
For some of us old folks, that's definitely been something. And my family, we have a cabin that's about an hour and a half east of where we currently live, that you cannot have internet. There's no internet. Cell phones don't work. We don't have a TV. We have a television, but it's only have DVDs. And so I've been living that social media isolation a couple times a month for a while. And I will tell you, the rejuvenation you feel is unbelievable. And we haven't been going to our cabin lately, but I can tell you, I have been working my tail off outside, and I've learned that stress, and I need that input. We've stained our deck. I've literally dug a ditch. I laid sod. I mean, I'm staying physically busy because I know that's what I need. And last night, my wife and I, we stained the deck for hours yesterday, and we sat down at the end, and I had me a cold beverage, and I said, man, I just feel good. And she said, really? I'm sore. And I said, but that's feeling good to me, is feeling that physical, that getting that input and output of that physical. And I think those are keys to know what you need as a human. What is it that you need in the time of stress? And I think right now is a time that all of us as educators can pre-forgive ourselves and take that time. Yesterday, I was on a call with all of the principals, and they were sharing out here in Nashville. And one principal said, I'm just so grateful for the time that I have with my family, because my son is in high school. He was about to start playing baseball. He was going to have baseball 4 days a week. We were going to try to figure out how we were going to get him there and eat dinner and see each other. He said, and then the brakes were put on. And he said, and I'm standing in a space of gratefulness right now, because it's a time in which I can reconnect with my own family, because we were going to try to figure out how to do that. So on an optimistic side of things, what do you see the positive of this? Because in the words of one of my exceptional ed teachers, who, she's a Happy Teacher Revolution host at our school, she says all the time, I'm insanely optimistic. What do you see the optimism coming out of this? Because I think there is some. We just have to identify it.
I think I'm the most optimistic about our educators and stakeholders coming out of isolation. Like, for the first time, we can gather together in person and see each other as human beings. Like, that's going to be huge for me, because I do really miss circling up with our, Happy Teacher Revolution folders and being able to just be in space, like hold space with people. And that's what I'm really optimistic about. I'm optimistic about, you gave me this card the last time I came to Fall Hamilton, and I was in Nashville, and it has been sitting on my desk every single day. Every day. I even have this little stand for it. And the question is, what do you really want? And so this is a question I ask myself every day. Like, what do I really want? Like, I really want to make a difference in the lives of teachers. I really want kids to learn from a happy, teacher who finds joy in their profession every year that they're in school, I really want to make a difference and an impact in the lives of others. And so like, I'm hoping that at the end of this, like people can really boil down that essential question for them of what's really important.
And what I've learned during this time is it's so strange, and I'm hearing it across the country, is that educators are coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Is that there's a unity in my school right now. I'm going to be very honest and frank that I didn't feel all year, where people are coming together around. And I guess maybe it is that in a time of crisis, educators are the ones that are running towards the fire, like many help professions,
Yeah.
right? But maybe it's that. I don't know, but it's truly remarkable. My leadership team meetings, we meet every week, and we're actually looking at the core values and the pillars of who Fall Hamilton is, and we're aligning those to our values to our goals. And I can feel us coming together, and it's done virtually. It's just so strange, but I think you're right. I think there's an opportunity right now for virtual connection that's going to bridge over to true personal connection when this is over.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think too, what Happy Teacher Revolution has been able to offer educators is a sense of community and belonging if they don't have it in their school or their team or their floor, which unfortunately, there are teachers who are working in toxic school districts or toxic school environments, and even school districts that I know and love with teachers working there who someday, if I have kiddos, like I would be honored if my students would be in their classrooms, aren't being supported by their own district. Their own district isn't even sharing resources about teacher mental health and wellness. And so, our voices are silenced still, unfortunately, but there are those of us who are disruptors like you, Matthew, who are amplifying the narratives of those whose stories really need to be shared.
Isn't it interesting? I go back to, I grew up in a very conservative home, and it was, don't talk about the S word. Don't talk about sex, because then they'll figure it out. Right? Isn't this the same? It's the same concept with schools and school districts. Don't talk about stress, because then they'll figure out their stress.
Yeah.
Like, no, they already know. And if we don't talk about it in a healthy way, people are going to self-soothe in ways that are not healthy. They're going to not engage in conversations with their colleagues that are safe. They're not going to be able to connect with their administrator around supports that they need. And ultimately, they're going to leave the profession. We know that. Statistics and data are clear. 3 to 5 years, teachers are out. And so why do you think that is? It's like when I feel like I'm 16 again in my house, where you don't talk about stuff because then you may figure it out. We already know we're stressed. Like, do you think we're going to come out after this with a different perspective that everybody's feeling stressed now? So can we actually start talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, in some ways, I think that this total upending of our world has helped show us what's really important. And in some ways, I feel like it has been thrown out the window. Like the disconnect, cognitive dissonance, honestly, is what it comes down to. And I think, the fact that, that we're not prioritizing teacher mental health and wellness during a global pandemic. If we're not doing it now, when are we going to? Honestly. And so, I think it just goes to show that there's so much more that needs to be done in terms of supporting teachers. And, I've had district officials say like, oh no, we're not even going to go there. That's like opening Pandora's box. And I'm like, if y'all at the top are seeing this, and I think honestly what it boils down to is this fear of holding the mirror up to oneself and owning up and being held accountable for your own self-care and self-awareness, because that's the first step. And so I think it's rooted a lot in fear and insecurities around oneself and fear around making a transformational change, because change is scary. It is scary.
For people who are not disruptors.
For people who are not disruptors. But gosh, I mean, but that change it's essential, because we're at a pivot point. Honestly, I think there's a pandemic happening called coronavirus, but there's a pandemic happening called teacher burnout and stress. And that's
100.
happened before. That was existed long before now.
It's so true. And so I'm going to ask you a loaded question. And if you punch the video, because I know we're videoing this and we'll be putting it on YouTube, If you punch the video, I'm going to totally understand because this is going to like get you fired up. But what do you tell administrators, district or school administrators that say, listen, this is their job. They knew what they were getting into. They need to suck it up and just do their job. What do you respond to that? Because I'm going to be honest, I've heard colleagues say it. I've heard people say it. And it's like, hold on a minute. So what's your response?
I have never met a teacher who just did their job and whoever said, well, that's not in my job description. Teachers that are the type of human beings who, as we can all see, and it has been demonstrated recently, are the type of human beings who lean in, who are willing to go the extra mile without the pat on the back, without the Heroes Award plaque or trophy, without the paycheck. In fact, they have a lot of bills to pay, including student loans and other essential supplies or things that they're getting for their kiddos. And so here's the thing. I really believe that our teachers are incredible human beings, that people who are drawn to the profession are incredible human beings, and that we need to keep great teachers in the classroom working with kiddos. It doesn't make sense to me that in order to climb the professional ladder, that teachers are removed from the classroom. And so I want to incentivize a way to keep our educators working with kiddos and to highlight the work of our veteran teachers. And I really think, that our educators have workplace demands that are unlike ever before. 20, 30 years ago, on back to school time, when teachers would show up before the kiddos were there, they would learn about, the curriculum coming up, they'd reflect on data, and they would backwards plan, do that kind of thing. But now our support and training for teachers before they go back to school are how to recognize mental illness and suicide in students, how to call Child Protective Services because you're a mandated reporter, how to prepare for armed lockdown drills when there's an armed shooter in the building. And so these are types of things and demands of our teachers that, no, it's not in our workplace like protocol, but we are often the first responders and the gatekeepers who then send, our students and their families to the appropriate resources and directions. But we're the first ones who are receiving information oftentimes. It's our face, it's our voice, it's our interaction with family, community members, and stakeholders. And so, I, for one, want that person to be happy and not miserable and sad and, death spiraling into negativity. I really think that everyone, whoever they are, has to find their joy, their purpose, their why for what they're doing. And if it's not teaching anymore, that's okay. You have permission to leave. No one is forcing you to do this, to be miserable in your job. And so that's the thing. Like, I had to realize Happy Teacher Revolution isn't for everyone. It's not for everyone. We are a disruptive, grassroots, aggressive movement who is here to support teachers no matter what. And we're not going to do the policy stuff and there's the red tape and this and that. And it's just like, here's the thing. We're here for the teachers because they're the ones who are taking care of the kiddos. So
I love that. I love that. And I love that, I've been asked so many times, so are you going to continue to be a principal? Are you going to go out and just start speaking and all that? No, I'm going to be a principal. Why? Because I choose to be. It's a space in which I live. It's an extremely tough job. It's hard. There's many days that I just walk away going, oh my gosh, what just happened? But I look forward to coming back every day. And what brings me back is not just the kids. It's the educators, the ones that every day they're showing up for kids in a space that is healthy. They're showing up for a kid when they make a mistake to say, I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't handle that correctly. They're showing up in my office going, something needs to happen to support this child. Not in a way of they need to be punished, they need to be put out, but no, they need more services. That's what gets me up in the morning, is my educators and my kids and my families and my community. But the amount of amazing things that I get to see the teachers in my school do every day is awe-inspiring. I mean, whether they're texting me now saying, hey, can you join a Zoom call with my class, and us just coming together, to me, seeing them making special deliveries off the record for food because the families don't have it and they don't have access. There's just so many pieces that I think is important. And I want to go back to something you said, because I heard somebody else speak about it, and I think it's really important, is that the view of an educator changed with Sandy Hook. It changed. What we look at ourselves and as the world looks at us, we are certainly first responders in a lot of cases. And I think at that point in our history, it changed how we view ourselves, whether consciously or subconsciously, and it changed how the community looks at us. But the value of an educator hasn't changed. The view of an educator has changed. But people still, I mean, just this last week announced, governor says, or mayor says, Nashville Public Schools has to cut $100 million from their budget. $100 million in the it city. Nashville is the it city. And it's like, wait a minute, I get it. This pandemic has happened and it's had a huge economic impact. But education is where we're going to cut this. So I think there's still a lot of value that we have to project on our profession because we're invaluable. I think this has also shown that educators in the classroom are imperative. Mm-hmm. I mean, kids on computers, there's always been this fear since like 2000, Y2K, teachers are going to be gone. Everything's going to be done on computer. I think it's pretty obvious right now that can never happen in our lifetime because everybody's like, please, Lord, help us. We need our teachers back, right? But anyway, I've rambled too long. I need to ask you one more question, and it's the question I ask when I conclude with everybody. And I think it's more powerful from you than anybody that I've spoken to. And it is, what do you want teachers to know right now? From your perspective, if you're talking to the teachers, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but this is really directed from your heart to theirs. What do you want them to know?
You're not alone. We're here with you, and your voice matters. Your voice matters a whole heck of a lot. And don't silence it and don't dim your light when other people try to put you down. You know, I think that's a big thing is that teachers, gosh, they're just the most sparkly, incredible people. And, you know, even like the curmudgeon-y, but like really great, you know, it's like, oh, I love that teacher in action. A great teacher in action is pure magic. And so that's my message for teachers is that you are magic. You are still magic. I know the Zoom thing's weird, but your magic can transcend all of this, and your magic is going to be even more powerful when you get to see your kiddos again and your colleagues and the families, and just think about that moment, that bright light at the end of the tunnel. I'm here for you. You're not alone. My name's Danna at happyteacherrevolution.com, and email me. I'll give you my number. I want you to know that like this is temporary. This is, consider it solitude instead of isolation. You are essential. You're essential to all those around you, and you are enough. And don't let anyone else ever convince you otherwise.
And I'm glad you gave your email address because I do want to ask if people want to follow you on social media. I can tell you I find entertainment in all of your videos. The amount of joy you exude is infectious, and if I see a Facebook story pop up, I'm watching it because I'm like, the amount of energy you bring is just it just lightens so many people. So if they want to follow you on social media, where would they find you?
Yeah, find us at Happy Teacher Revolution on Facebook and Instagram. On Twitter, we are at Happy Teacher HTR.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for your disruptor spirit and for Happy Teacher Revolution, as I've seen it transform in my school, and I hope other educators in schools will look into it. And thank you all for listening to the Trauma Informed Educators Network podcast. And just a reminder, I know I'm getting some emails. We have not made the call to cancel the Trauma Informed Educators Network conference yet. We're going to wait till mid-May to see how it all plays out, because we don't want to cancel a unification of disruptors from around the world if we don't have to. But of course, we're going to keep safety as the priority. So thank you for listening. If you want to follow me, I am at Principal List at Twitter and also Instagram. Matthew Portell on Facebook. And as always, thank you for listening. Wash your hands and be safe.